Hey guys, I'm going to be making a tutorial today for setting up keyboard and mouse for DS2 speedrunning. I guess you could even use this if you're just trying to learn playing the game on keyboard and mouse, or trying to set up playing the game on keyboard and mouse. Could be useful for somebody. But before I get into the tutorial, there'll be a couple of things to show, just programs that are helpful to have for playing on keyboard and mouse in DS2. Actually, let me... I guess since I need to open this anyway, I'll start with Rivatuner. So if you're speedrunning DS2, you're required to use Rivatuner or some other program to limit your FPS and display it, as you can see in the top corner there. So Dark Souls 2, if you're running unrestricted, this will be relevant to you, otherwise it doesn't really matter. Here's my settings just for the sake of showing it, I guess. But if you could just set up plugins, hotkey handler, right here, the set 20 FPS frame rate limit and set 60 FPS frame rate limit. Obviously, you can only toggle your FPS to 20 in unrestricted. In restricted, you're not allowed to toggle FPS. You use this on a couple of skips and for like Card Soul and Bomb Wall if you want. So what you're going to do is go to Profiles, click the three dots, and then click Preset, set 60 FPS frame rate limit, and just change the modifier value to 20 from 60. And then obviously do the same thing, but leave it at 60. And I use Caps Lock and Grave Key for these because they are... You use them like twice in the run, basically. And I don't really mind having to stretch for an awkward button if I'm barely using it. The way that I try to prioritize my keybinds, and I recommend you doing this as well, is by using the shit that you're going to be using the most, like interact, talk to NPCs, use items, two-hand weapon, parry, auto run, shit like that. You want to have that as close to WASD as you can because you want to limit how much you're stretching your fingers so you don't get carpal tunnel and fuck up your hands for the rest of your life because you wanted to speedrun DS2. And as well as that, I have a AutoHotKey script for DS2, and I have this at the start. I'll leave this in the description because this basically makes it so the script, excuse me, only works when DS2 is open and only works in the DS2 window. So for example, if I go into the game and I press my comma key, it's gonna work as attacking. But if I try and use it here, it's still gonna be the comma. So when you sort out your keybinds and you know you want to start rebinding shit, and the reason you do this, by the way, is because you can't bind stuff to two buttons in DS2. So if you wanted your attack button, for example, to be on H and also on, I don't know, B or something, you can only have it on one of them. So to get around that, you can have your attack button on H in the game, and then you could have B bound to H, and it would make it so you can do both buttons. So I have this because 1, 2, 3, 4 is my arrow keys in game. I like to use that instead of actually using the arrow keys or the numpad because it means I can keep my hand on the mouse for the entire run. And then I found that it was too difficult to do character creation with the arrow keys. I mean, not the arrow keys, the numbers. So I rebound the arrow keys in AutoHotKey by up, and I'll show you. So I'll leave a link to this in the description. If you don't already have AutoHotKey, you can go to index, search key list, click enter, and it'll open this one, and you can just find, like for me, I was using the arrow keys, so here they are, and the name is up. So in my script, up 2 colons to rebind it, and then change it to 1, and that makes it so I can obviously use 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I can also use my arrow keys in the game. And then this is for jump and for attack, because in unrestricted, when you're parry walking, you're going to be riposting an enemy with the attack key and jumping at the same time, and you pretty much just want that to be on 2 keys right next to each other to make it as easy as possible. And as well as that, I have a program for my mouse because my mouse has 2 buttons on the side and it doesn't come with software. And obviously DS2 doesn't work to have mouse buttons, so it's an ancient game. And so in the setup, I'll leave a link to this as well. If your mouse also doesn't have software, or you just want to use this instead of your mouse software, I think this is actually a really good program because you can just click add and add an application. It'll only work in the application. As you can see, I have like every game that I've ever used it for. And DS2, mouse button 4, which is the bottom one, to left, and 5 to right, which is the top one. And that lets me do some menuing with my mouse as well, because right and left you use a lot more than up and down, I feel like, in the run. And that about sorts that, I think. So if I start a new game, I should probably swap to my DS2 capture. Here we go, so you can see my keybinds. Okay, so every time we open DS2, there is a setting, disable double clicking. I already have it on, but since I just opened the game, I'll show you what happens. If I left click, look at the input delay I'm getting. It's like a full second. It's ridiculous. And if I try and spam, okay, never mind. Maybe I've already actually done this. Yeah, if I turn it off real quick. Wait, I didn't turn it off. I did my mouse move turn it off. Okay. So it's going to be off, and if you left click, look at what happens. Insanely delayed. It's like a full second of delay. And if you try and spam, it's just not even going to do anything. It's not even going to work. You have to like perfectly time the inputs, and you get delay on them. So you want to turn this on as early as possible, but every time you reopen the game, for some reason, it breaks it. So you just have to turn it off and turn it back on, and it'll fix it every time you reopen the game. There is a workaround if you use AutoHotKey. I guess if you're playing casually, this will be fine, but if you rebind your mouse buttons to keyboard buttons, for example, like H and then right click, you could have like Shift H. Actually need to get out of this menu because I don't know what it was before. Okay, there we go. That fixes it, so you can have your mouse buttons act as keys and rebind them in AutoHotKey if you do the script. That solves having to refix the double clicking thing every time you open the game, but it makes it so you can't click in the menu. There might be a way you can fix it if you use the like shift grave key, the little mustache looking thing next to the 1 key. That lets it AutoHotKey send the key press as well as rebind it. So maybe you could do that and it works. I haven't really messed around with it. I just find it easier to just turn this on and off every time I open the game. But yeah, with that out of the way, I think I'm ready to show my keybinds. Oh, I guess I can go over movement first. So with keyboard and mouse, the movement is a lot better in running sections than controller. You can take some pretty insane lines and like go perfectly around shit like that. You want to be careful not to bump into stuff, because if you're doing a running section and you bump into something like that, you're going to lose time. It's better to just strafe, even if there's an enemy, like, let's say this pillar is an enemy, it's faster, instead of going like this and brushing past him, it's faster to just, like, go around him a little bit. You don't want to be bumping into shit. You lose a little bit of time. It's like a small optimization. So yeah, and then also with the WASD movement, obviously you have only 8 directions you can move in when you're using the arrow keys. Where the controller, where you can just go wherever. But the only thing that this really sucks on is you can get like keyboard turns. You need to get used to feathering your input. So you can see I'm like, there's a brief moment where I'm holding both the keys, W and D, when I'm moving like this. Because if you try and... I need to be sprinting to do this probably. Yeah, look at that. If you don't do it properly, you get this like back turn. And if you're trying to do the Ornstein opener, for example, if you're running all bosses, or fighting Rotten is probably the hardest fight to learn when you're moving to keyboard and mouse, because you have to go forward and back so much like this. If you try and do the strafe turn on Ornstein opener and you do that, you're gonna die. So you need to be careful of that and just get used to feathering your inputs like this, so that you don't get these meme turnarounds. There's other things that can happen as well, like on some parts it's a lot more prominent than others, like you'll open the menu near a wall, and for some reason your camera will like flip or go in some really weird direction. Like you open it and it'll end up here for some reason, and then you'll start running this way. It's pretty rare in restricted, but in unrestricted there's some places that it just always happens for some reason. Like after the parry walk on the way to Old Iron King, your menu will do that, so you just want to open it early to get it out of the way so it won't do it, so that you can actually menu. You don't lose time doing it there, but it's worth noting. So I think that basically covers the movement though. There's a few things like when you're holding diagonal directions, your camera will follow you. Some people I've seen don't like this. They find it very difficult. It feels like they're fighting the camera, but if you get used to it, you'll know like where to move your mouse so that it runs like this. And it's actually very useful being able to take lines like this and knowing how to move your mouse to, I guess, control the camera and keep it still when it's trying to move. It means if I'm, for example, like coming from this direction and I want to run like this and then take a line like that, it's a lot easier than going around like this, I feel like. And it's nice to be able to see where you're going. Sometimes it's useful to have this. But yeah, so apart from that, I think I can get to showing my keybinds. I should say though that copying people's keybinds is not the best thing. Like, I wouldn't say don't do it. Like, you can definitely copy like some of people's keybinds, but it all really comes down to preference in the end. And if there's a game, like for me, I had a lot of hours in like Fortnite and PUBG and shit like that. So I tried to sort of replicate the buttons I was using in those in this game, and it made the most sense to me. But pretty much just use whatever's comfortable and whatever you think will make the most sense. But generally, most runners have very similar keybinds just because of how the game plays and the idea that you want your hand to be on the mouse for the entire run, as opposed to clicking the arrow keys or the numpad for menuing. Anyway, so the first thing, camera sensitivity. I have this on not 0, because if I have it on 0, I have like 800 DPI, and this is so slow. It even feels like I'm getting input delay, it's that slow. So I just have it on 1 tick, because if you have it more than 1, I find that you get a lot of like mouse acceleration, and that is obviously not good. You want to be consistent with your mouse movement, so you don't want to have acceleration. But if you were to fight that and put it to 0 and then just change your DPI to be really high, you would have really high DPI in the menus, and menuing on keyboard and mouse is what saves so much time. I will load a menuing save file and go over it after I show the keybinds, just to show the power of KBM menuing, but having high DPI in the menu is very difficult. I wouldn't recommend it. Double clicking I've already showed. This I did change by default for some reason. Attack with the right hand is right click and attack with the left hand is left click, and obviously your weapon is going to be in the right weapon slot for the entire run, and you're going to be using it. And I found it very weird to right click to attack, because in every other game left click is attack, so I just swapped them around and made more sense to me. Same for the shift to strong attack with the right and left hand. I think the rest of this is all default. I don't really use it apart from this, the camera lock, click mouse wheel, and the jump. There's like 2 places where I actually do use this. Now, if your mouse has extra mouse buttons, you can just rebind jump to one of those, or even if you don't want to use mouse wheel to lock on and you want to use, where is it? This one? Then you can just make your jump middle mouse. I find that very good in some places, especially with moon jumps, because there's some moon jumps where you want to be like going right and then moon jumping, and trying to do that with the F key is so scuffed for me. Like, I don't think I could even do that, having to use like pretty much 5 fingers on the keyboard. But yeah, I'm pretty much used to having shift plus click mouse wheel to do that, because I've been doing it for a while. I do it for Dwarf as well, and restricted, just going like this and doing the diagonal jump like that, as opposed to moving the camera and doing this. But the reason it's so good in moon jumps is because obviously you can't move the camera while you're in the menu on keyboard and mouse, so you have to do the keyboard movement like that to do the jump. Anyway, that's what it is. I don't want to dwell on the keybinds for too long, because once again, it's mostly just preference, but I want to be able to explain all of them and what I think is a high priority button to have close to WASD and what isn't. So walk, left alt, you don't really use this apart from unrestricted for parry walks. I walk for almost every parry walk. If you're running restricted all bosses though, I guess you'll walk for the Fume Knight elevator, like walking onto the last elevator, as opposed to walking off at this speed, because you can fall and die and lose your run. Well, you wouldn't lose your run, but you would lose a lot of time, and if you're going for recce, then you basically lose your run, because that's like 20 seconds. Roll, space, obviously WASD for movement. Jump, F, I think these are default. Auto walk I have on 7, because once again, DS2 is a funny game where you can't get rid of keybinds, so I just bound it to something that is far away that I'm never going to touch. Like, when am I ever going to press 7? That is complete trash. and X for auto run. Obviously you will know what auto run is if you've played this game or if you speedrun or watch speedruns of this game. Auto run basically allows you to, because if I open the menu while I'm holding the sprint key, I can't sprint. If I auto run open the menu, I can sprint in the menu, and obviously you're going to need that if you're going to be speedrunning the game, because you don't want to lose time every time you menu. And to do some skips as well, or not skips, but like some minor time saves, you actually do need auto run, like the jump cancels on dialogue, on the yes no confirmation prompts. I mean, this, I think this is all default. I might have changed this just because I don't use it to something far away, but these are probably worth noting because obviously you can't move the camera with the mouse when you have the menu open on keyboard, so you have to use IJKL. You probably won't use it much, but it's useful on stuff like NPC menuing, like the Malentia menuing. If you fuck up your camera angle, you can sort of tweak it a bit like this. Shit like that. Or if you're just resting at a bonfire and you want to look behind you or something, or if you're getting up from a bonfire and you want to move your camera, you can do that. I think apart from that though, it's pretty much all optional. Maybe if you want to go for the infinite stamina thing, some ledges in DS2 you can open the menu and it like gives you infinite stamina for some reason. You obviously won't be able to move your camera, you have to use IJKL if you're going to do that, but I wouldn't really recommend messing with that. Loses time if you don't get it first try, and it barely even saves time. I don't even know if it saves time. So HUY, obviously I'm not using these, I just put them on random buttons that I'm never going to press. Z I actually do use because that is the one-hand rapier parry button. Obviously I don't have a rapier so I can't show you, but use A unrestricted to parry enemies for parry walks, and use item and interact R and E. I think this is really good. If you're going to copy anything, copy this, because having these two next to each other is very helpful, and they're probably the buttons that you use the most in the run. And you want them to be next to each other because on some NPCs, when you're doing menuing, like Malentia, you're going to be popping a soul and talking to them, and you want to have these next to each other so you can do inputs like this. Because how it works is you pop the soul and talk to them close enough to each other that it brings up the soul prompt and also brings up the talk prompt, so you'll do that. Click on yes to pop the soul, and then spam E through the dialogue. As opposed to just popping the soul, waiting for the soul to pop, and then talking to them. It saves like probably 4 seconds or something every time you do that, because the soul animation is really slow. And then, yeah, two-hand my weapon is on V. I think that's pretty good. I used to use V in a lot of other games. It doesn't really feel uncomfortable to stretch my index finger to that button. And you're going to be using this quite a lot because you want to be two-handed the offhand to pick up items and interact with shit, and then obviously two-handed the right hand to attack enemies when you're fighting bosses. And M for lock guard, because like look at this keybind. Why is this even a thing? I don't know. I don't know why you would ever want to auto block in a game, but if they wanted to add that, then sure. So this one also definitely, please change this from escape. You do not want to be clicking escape every time you're menuing. Clicking escape is such a long key to reach to, and you're going to be opening the menu so much in every single category in DS2 that I think tab is really good. I don't know what else you would use, maybe like shift or something, but tab seems to make the most sense to me. Gesture menu on T, there's like one point in all bosses that you use a gesture menu, so that's a button that I have to stretch a bit for, but it doesn't matter because I don't lose time doing it, and I only click it once. And then obviously, I've already talked about this 1, 2, 3, 4 for the arrow keys. The way I did it was like clockwise, so up 1, right 2, down 3, left 4. Confirm, it's basically in the menus. If I want to like click on that to confirm something, I click E. It's the same as my interact button. And Q to cancel, so that's basically the back button, same as B on the controller. These don't really matter, I think. There you go, it's like holding shift lets you do this, but you don't really need to do that. You can still do it with the normal arrow keys, as long as you're not actually in this menu. Like, that's the only time you're in this menu, it won't let you, it'll just be in this. So you need to be up here to do that. And then C and G, so C is my unequip armor button, and G is my view stats or sorts button. So there's a couple places you'll be sorting, which is a bit more optimal than not sorting in this game. But also, I should mention, so on controller, when you're equipping armor, because you're going to be, if you're running all bosses, or maybe like some old Souls categories have the armor, I'm not sure. Or I think Scholar 80% has the armor, I don't know. Normally you look at the armor like this, so you'll go left, click E twice, and then to unequip you'll go like that. But on keyboard and mouse, what you can do is, you can do this on popping souls as well, but since I don't have one, I'll just use the DarkSoulsII because it's a pretty good example. Like normally you would open it, and then you would click E on it, and then you click E again. So if you mash, that's what it looks like. But instead of mashing, there's not really any input delay in DS2. So you can just click left click and E at the same time, and look at how fast this is. It's like a tiny bit of input delay. If you click them at the exact same time, it won't work. But do like a little delay. Look how much faster that is than clicking E twice. It's pretty ridiculous. And you can do the same logic for equipping the armor. So you can left click E, left click E, left click E, left click E, and look something like this. It's quite fast, as you can see, as opposed to doing it normally. Now you should be careful, because in some bosses you're going to be, like in the DLC fights at the end of all bosses runs, you'll be also, here is where I use the mouse button to go left to, because this is where I equip this, the Silver Serpent Ring that I swap on every boss in all bosses. And you go like that, equip the ring, and then equip all the armor. And if you're really good at this, it's very hard to do, but it's worth mentioning. You can actually homeward out of bosses too early. So you should be very careful of that. If you do that, yeah, it's probably fine if you do it once on accident, but it's worth noting anyway, just to demonstrate the power of KBM, I guess. But yeah, that basically covers all of the keybinds. So if I bring up my save organizer and I load a menuing save file, I'll just load Leningrad menuing, because it's a pretty good example. Where is it? Here we go. This is like the last thing I'll show, just as an example to put everything together that I've talked about, and why KBM is so good, especially for menuing. Even if you're a controller player and you want to learn KBM menuing, you could use this tutorial just to figure out the menuing, if you want to use KBM for menuing segments and controller for the rest of the run, which is a great idea. So for leveling, normally you don't level here in this run, but I'll just show it anyway. It's different in Scholar and Vanilla, because in Vanilla you're allowed to move the mouse like this, but in Scholar for some reason they made it so you can't do this, you have to go like that and move the mouse, like with the arrow key. I think that's really dumb, I don't know why they added that, but the same thing applies. So normally you'd level like this, right? With the arrow key or the D-pad. Or if you don't want to do that, you can click the up arrow or the down arrow. But what you can actually do is, if you click the arrow and use the D-pad or the arrow key at the same time, look at this. It's way faster than just doing it like that. So you can see my inputs. You don't do it at the exact same time, because then it doesn't work as consistent. I sort of do a tiny delay. And yeah. There you go. I did it at the exact same time there and it didn't work. So I do like a little delay and it's a little more consistent. So that's worth noting if you didn't know about that. Now you can level a lot faster. And for menuing, so if I were to do this on controller, it would look something like this. You would talk to him, and I would buy a mace, I would buy 2 rapiers, I would go back, I would buy 3 shards, and then I would go down, reinforce this rapier to +5. Obviously you can do that a little bit faster, I just haven't done this menuing in so long, and the mace to +1, and then I would go. But on keyboard and mouse, you can, there's 2 ways you can upgrade. I'll show both of them. One of them is a bit faster but a bit harder to do, which is why I would say having low DPI for these kinds of menus is a lot easier. You don't want to be flicking too hard. And then another way is much easier but a little bit slower. So you'll go over to the blacksmith or whatever NPC it is, and you can buy a mace, 2 rapiers, 3 shards, +5 rapier, +1 mace, like that. Like, look at how much faster that is than buying everything with the arrow keys. It's quite ridiculous how turbo you can go with these menus. So the other way you can do it, I'll show this. The final way, I think I've seen a couple of runners. I've seen Easy, and I think Sudo does it as well. We might not even lose time doing it like this, actually. I haven't actually timed it, but it just looks a little bit slower. Maybe it's possible to do it at the same speed, I have no idea. What you can do is the main, like the first part of the menuing will be the same, but upgrading the weapon is a bit different. So you'll spam through this, you'll buy the mace, the rapier, shards, and then I guess I should mention this is for unrestricted all bosses, this menuing. That's why I've bought 2 rapiers. Normally you won't buy 2 rapiers, it's just because the rapier can break from parries that you buy 2. Instead of like going like this and clicking every time, you can click E and just spam E like this and just move the mouse, because yeah, let me buy more shards just to demonstrate. Oop. If you just spam E, it's not gonna, like, you need to move the mouse to get back on the ES prompt. So if you just spam E and do this, it's probably a lot easier than like going like that. I should probably time it and figure out if it is even faster to do it the clicking way, but I've done it for so long now that I don't really bother with the other strat. So I think that basically explains everything. I'm going to leave a link to everything I've used in the description, like Rivatuner, AutoHotKey, the X button, what is it, X mouse button control, whatever it's called. I'll leave a link to the SpeedSouls Discord, and I'll put my Discord in the description in case you want to ask me any questions or anything, or if you need help with DS2 speedrunning. And I'll put the, I'll show it one more time, I guess, this right here, so that your script will only work in DS2 if you want to use AutoHotKey. In the description as well. But I think that basically covers everything. If you're going to learn to speedrun this game with keyboard and mouse, then good luck and hope it goes well. Even if you're not speedrunning and you just wanted to figure out some keybinds or like understand more about keyboard and mouse in DS2, or if you had the issue with the double clicking and this helped you, then that's great as well. But yeah, thanks for watching and good luck against Tanimura if you plan to speedrun this game.